being a speaker it's hard work. And so I don't want to sugarcoat it. And so one thing I always remind speakers of is it's simple, but it's not easy. So it's kind of like if you wanted to lose weight, what do you need to do? Well, there's two core things you need to do. You need to pay attention to what you eat, and you need to exercise. Like, it's simple, but it's not easy. It still requires work and effort and discipline. Yeah, like the same thing is true whenever it comes to being a speaker. Like, what do you need to do? You need to get customers, you need to take care of them, you need to sell, you need to deliver. Like, it's really simple, but it's not easy. Like, it still requires a lot of work and effort. And the same thing is true with being a speaker.
I create clear thinking and decisive leaders who can amplify their influence. Contact me to find out how I can help you or your organisation.
And today, our guest is Grant Baldwin. Hi, Grant.
Hey, Judith, how are you today?
I am awesome, as you guys say, from over the pond.
Very good.
And you've just woken up, right?
Well, I've been up for a few hours. So we were just talking a little bit before we hit record here. I'm in the US, you're across the pond, and so my day's getting rolling and your day's wrapping up. But that's the power of technology and the chance for us to connect and have a good conversation and hopefully help some people along the way.
That sounds great. So before we start, you tell me who you are, Grant.
Yeah, I'd say most importantly, beyond probably what we're going to cover and talk about today, is I'm a husband and a father. Those are the two most important roles to me. I'm married to my high school sweetheart. We've been married for 20 years, and we got three beautiful daughters. So it's me and a house full of women. It's the absolute best. I absolutely love it. And so those are the two things that really, I think, I hope define and shape who I am. So in the professional sense, I have been in the speaking industry for about 16, 17 years or so. I was a full-time speaker for several years. I was traveling around primarily the US, doing around 60, 70 speaking gigs a year. Learned just a ton about the speaking industry. How does that world work? And I had a lot of people who were asking me like, hey, I want to be a speaker. How do I find gigs? And what do I speak about? And how much do you charge? And who hires speakers? And how does this mysterious world work? And so about 6, 7 years ago is when I started the Speaker Lab, which is a training and coaching company for professional speakers and those interested in speaking. And that's the core of what we do today is help people understand how to find and book paid speaking engagements and get paid to share their message and make an impact and income.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. I think what you said there was really interesting because there's two types of professional speakers, isn't there? So there's those that use it as part of their business and those that make a living.
Yeah. I think that's one of the great things about speaking is there's a lot of versatility to it, meaning it can be used in a variety of different ways. I'll give you some examples. Meaning there are some speakers who want, like I said, for me, when I was speaking full time, I was doing around 70 gigs a year. And there's some speakers that I know that do 100 gigs a year and 150 gigs a year, and some that do 5. And it's not that one's better or worse than the other. There's just a lot of flexibility in terms of what makes sense for you. The other part of what you're kind of alluded to there is why you want to speak in the first place. And so for some people, it may just be like, I have a cool story to share. Or I was impacted by a speaker. I've done a little bit of speaking before. I'd love to do more of it. I would love to get paid to do it. And so there's certainly speakers who just want to speak. But there's also there's a lot of speakers who use speaking as lead generation or for some other part of their business. And so maybe for listeners, they do some coaching or consulting, or they have a book or some type of product or service that they want to offer. Speaking can be a really, really strong form of lead generation to connect with an audience that then may be interested in your product or service. So yeah, there's a ton of flexibility and options in terms of why someone might want to speak.
Yeah, I was just sort of thinking about myself as you was talking there, which I hopefully it's not considered too selfish to do that. But I was just sort of thinking that when I speak, I tend to not necessarily do one speak multiple times. I tend to speak often a new talk for a new audience, if that makes sense.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I would not recommend that. And here's why. I want you to think about this kind of like going to a restaurant, right? If you go to a restaurant and you sit down, one of the first things they're going to do is they're going to bring you a menu of here's a preset list of items that we can make for you. you wouldn't go sit down and they would say, welcome to a restaurant. What would you like today? And you're like, well, I'd like to see a menu. And they're like, well, we don't have menus. We can cook anything that you'd like. That is a recipe for disaster. And so you want to, when you go to a restaurant, you want to see like, hey, here's the, several items that we make that we're really, really good at making. And specifically, they probably have a couple of like signature dishes. Like these are our best sellers. These are our top items. And we know how to make these things really, really well. Like we've made these hundreds or thousands of times and we're excellent at them versus just kind of creating something from scratch every time. So whenever you are creating something from scratch, like in your case, whenever it comes to a speech, as you know, Judith, it takes a lot of work. It's a lot of work when you're just starting from kind of a blank slate and going like, I don't, what am I talking about and who am I talking to? And I got to make sure this thing is very, very custom versus for the most part, if you're speaking for the most part to different audiences, then there's not a lot of need to be creating a new talk every single time because that audience hasn't seen you before. And so one of the things that's great about speaking, and the same with like going back to, if you're a chef or a cook or something, is each time you make the dish and each time you give a speech, it gets better because you figure out what works and what doesn't. When you're creating a talk from scratch, you're making an educated guess. I think this is funny. I think this will resonate. I think this will make sense. I think this is a good story. I think this is inspirational, but you don't really know until you get up in front of that audience. And the same thing is true with a dish. When they're making a dish, they're going, okay, I think this will work. And then you make it and then you're able to taste and try and like, okay, it was too salty or we need to cook it a little bit longer or it needs, it needs a little bit more sweet flavor to it or something. And so you're able to make those adjustments versus like if you're just making something from scratch every single time, then you don't have a lot of opportunities for it to improve and get better. So I would highly recommend that speakers, especially if you're speaking for the most part on a similar topic to different audiences on a consistent basis, is to not start with a blank slate every single time, but to say, hey, here's some stuff that I know works. I've presented this before and I'm confident in this material and present on that on a consistent basis and improve that over time versus starting from scratch.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense, especially if you were the keynote speaker, you'd have one or two that you would do. I guess that makes a lot of sense. I suppose for me, when I was speaking, I think about it, when I was speaking to business owners, I have some set speeches, but when I'm talking to corporate audiences, they tend to be bespoke to the need of the organization at the time. So I guess for me, my primary sell is not the speaking, it's the consulting.
Yeah, and there's probably going to be some commonalities between like the different companies that you may be working with or the different corporations. So for example, let's say that you're speaking on, customer service. Well, customer service is pretty universal, and there may be some nuanced differences between one industry versus the other. If you're talking to let's say a call center and all their customer service is primarily going to be over the phone versus customer service of, let's say, a restaurant, that's going to be more of an in-person type of experience and human to human interaction. But the customer service experience is going to be, as far as like the principles and the ideas, the concepts are going to be universally the same. And so, yeah, there's going to generally be some type of like customization there, but there's also like a lot of like the core ideas, the stories, the illustrations that you may be using that are probably going to be largely the same. And so, yeah, the way I always try to think of it is, for the most part, if I'm doing a speech or presentation, it's probably going to be 80% of the talk that's going to be the same from one presentation to the next, and then there may be 10-20% that may be modified or tweaked or more specific and custom to that audience. But again, for the most part, a lot of it's going to be pretty much the same from one audience to the next.
Oh, I got you. So I think we're in agreement. Yeah, because I was thinking about where you had the one talk that is the same all the way through each time. I know there's a lot of people make really good money doing that, but they tend to be hired because someone heard the speech and then they want to hear it somewhere else.
Yeah, and I guess another thought on that would be that again, there's not like a right or wrong way that you have to do it.
It's really cool.
It's very cool, it's kind of. I was talking with someone yesterday, and they were asking, "Hey, what makes a good speaker?" And I was like, there's some universal things, but it just kind of it depends, meaning like it's kind of like there's I think a level of subjectivity to it, similar to like music or movies or TV show or art. That there's going to be some things that some type of music that someone listens to, and one person's like, that was amazing, and one person's like, I didn't get it, it didn't make any sense to me. And so the same thing was whenever it comes to the speaking and giving a presentation, is there's not like, hey, you have to do it this way, you have to give one speech every single time. You can do something super custom every single time. I also know speakers who, again, are on both ends of the spectrum. I know of a speaker who he's kind of like, I'm giving the exact same speech word for word, and if you don't like it, tough, I'll find someone else that'll book it. And like, that's what clients are getting. That's what clients know that they're signing up for. And other speakers who put a massive amount of customization into every speech and presentation that they give. Again, it's not that one's better or worse necessarily. There's pros and cons with both of them. You just got to figure out and determine kind of what makes sense for you. And some of that is just kind of like figuring that out over time. That's not necessarily something that you know immediately from day one, but something you just kind of learn and figure out, like, hey, I enjoy doing more customization, or I don't enjoy that, or it's a lot more work and it doesn't seem to go as well versus if I'm doing the same talk every time. So just give yourself some freedom and flexibility to figure out what works and makes sense for you.
So great. So tell me then, so you're a professional, you say you've done some talk, maybe you weren't paid for them because you were, so you're, I don't know, you're a coach or consultant or something. You've done some talks, they've been free lead generation, and now you want to start to get paid for your talks. Is there like a set way to go about doing that, or does it just depend?
Yeah. So I'll give you within our programs, we teach what we call the Speaker Success Roadmap. It's a 5-step process that makes the acronym SPEAK, SPEAK. And so why don't I just like real quick, I'll just kind of like walk through at a high level what that is, and then we can kind of dig in wherever you want. But the first part of the process is select a problem to solve. And so there's 2 things you really need to be clear on. Number 1 is, who do you speak to? And number 2 is, what problem do you solve for that audience? So whenever we talk about who do you speak to, the challenge for a lot of speakers is we're just like, we're kind of like, I don't know, I speak to people, I speak to humans, my message is for everybody, right? But that doesn't work. And the same thing is true whenever it comes to, well, what do you speak about? It's like, well, what do you want me to speak about? I can speak about anything. I can speak about entrepreneurship or business or marketing or customer service or sales or family or marriage or faith or raising kids or hobbies, or it's like on and on the list goes. It's like, you can't do it, just doesn't work like that. Like the challenge is, we think that in order to get the most opportunities possible, that we have to spread the net as far and wide as possible. But that's not what people are looking for. It's counterintuitive, but the more specific, the more narrow, the more focused you are, the easier it is to actually find and book engagements. And so one way that we talk about this is, you want to be the steakhouse and not the buffet. The steakhouse and not the buffet. And what do I mean by that is, let's imagine that we were all going out to eat. We're looking for a good steak. Like, we have a choice. We could go to a buffet where steak is one of 100 different things that they offer, and they're all mediocre. Or we could go to a steakhouse where they do one thing, but they do that one thing really, really, really well. They don't do pasta. They don't do seafood. They don't do tacos. They do steak, and that is it. And again, it's counterintuitive, but as a speaker, you want to be the steakhouse, not the buffet. You want to solve one specific problem for one specific audience. Now, if you get clear on that, then it makes everything else in the rest of the framework so much simpler, because you know which direction you're headed and you know where you're pointed. So that's the first step of the process. The S, select a problem to solve. The P is to prepare your talk. And so to be really, really clear on what is the solution that you're offering to that audience. Now, again, that could come in the form of a keynote. It could come in the form of a workshop or a breakout or a seminar. It could be something online and virtually. It could be something in person. There's a lot of different ways to kind of determine, like, what's the solution look like for the audience that you're providing. The next part is E, establish yourself as the expert. Establish yourself as the expert. So 2 key marketing assets that every speaker needs is, you need a website and a demo video. A website and a demo video. Now, in this day and age, if you don't have a website, you don't exist. People will not take you seriously. So you got to have a website. Number 2, you got to have a demo video. So what exactly is a demo video? So think of this like a movie trailer. A movie that may be 90 minutes or 2 hours long. They're going to boil down to 2 or 3 minutes. And within those 2 or 3 minutes, you have an idea of the plot, the theme, the genre, who's in it, kind of what the storyline might be. And the point of the movie trailer and the point of the demo video is to give people a taste to make them want to see more. So that demo video is really important for an event planner or a decision maker who's determining whether or not to hire you, that they have something that they can kind of watch and get a sense of like, hey, is this person a good fit for our event? Next part of the process, the A is acquire paid speaking gigs. Acquire paid speaking gigs. Now, this is the part that we want to fast forward to, that we want to jump to, but again, it's important to see that you need to have these other foundational pieces in place first. The point here is that you will need to have some type of process or system in place to be able to consistently find and book paid gigs. The mistake some speakers make is they say, okay, I've got my website, I got my demo video, and now I just sit back and I wait for the phone to ring. And it just doesn't work like that. And so you have to be more proactive than reactive in terms of reaching out and starting to build the momentum of the business. So speaking is very much a momentum business that I've heard a friend say, the more you speak, the more you speak. But initially, you're doing everything you can to just push that boulder to start to get some momentum. But once you get some of that momentum, it becomes easier to book gigs over time. But again, you can't just say, I've got a website and video, now I'm just going to sit back and I hope it all magically works out, because it just doesn't work like that. And then the last part of the process is K, know when to scale. Meaning, for a lot of people who are interested in speaking, they're also probably interested in, again, coaching or consulting or writing a book or doing a podcast or doing a course or doing all the things. And so we're going to say you can do all the things, but you can't do all the things at once. Something's going to come first, something's going to come last. So you've got to be really, really clear about how speaking fits into the mix for you. So again, kind of at a high level overview, that's the Speak framework that we teach our students on how to find and book gigs.
I've written down notes. I think it's brilliant.
Let's listen to a quick advert.
The Maverick Paradox. Judith Germain is an author, speaker, consultant, mentor, and trainer, and the leading authority on Maverick leadership. She is the founder of the Maverick Paradox, which supports organizations to enhance their leadership capabilities and to help business owners develop and grow their businesses. Judith enables individuals, business owners, and organizations to improve their impact and influence. She is also HR Zone's leadership columnist, and her expert opinion has appeared in national, international, and trade press.
Welcome back to the Maverick Paradox. This is the podcast for the pathologically curious.
Is there any particular part that is really problematic for your students?
Yeah, I think the first part, the S, selecting a problem to solve, I think that's the biggest challenge, because it's just easy to overanalyze and overthink all the different options. And so again, the default is that we think we need to spread the net as far and wide as possible. You know, who do I speak to? I speak to anybody. What do I speak about? I can speak about anything. And we think that leads to more opportunities. But again, that's not what people are looking for. Let me give another example here. Let's imagine, God forbid, that Judith, you needed brain surgery. Okay. You had some type of brain issue and you have a choice. Like, you could go to your local family medical doctor. They are a doctor. They went to medical school. They may have performed some surgeries before. They know more about the brain than you or I, but they haven't done brain surgery. So you could go see that doctor, or you could go to a brain surgeon, where all they do day in and day out is they perform brain surgery. They know way more about the brain than either of us. This is what they do. If you have let's say you have a sore throat, you're not going to go to them. If you have trouble with you have a broken leg, you're probably not going to go to them. If you got COVID, you're not going to go to them. But if you got a brain issue, this is what they do. This is where they specialize. And you want to do the same thing as a speaker. You want to be the specialist and not the generalist, and solve, again, one specific problem for one specific audience. So I'd say that's definitely the biggest hurdle and challenge, is helping speakers to narrow that down. That's a big part of what we do within our coaching and training programs, is help speakers get that narrowed down so that they realize that they can't do all things for all people.
Brilliant. You know what? You really surprised me there, because I still just going to say acquiring paid speaking gigs would be the hardest.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly part of it. But oftentimes when you're clear, though, on the S, selecting a problem to solve, then acquiring paid gigs becomes so much simpler, because you know where you're looking, right? You've narrowed it down significantly versus if you just say, well, I'll speak to anybody about anything. It's like, well, where do you even begin? Like, there's way too many opportunities, and you're just kind of like, you're throwing so many different things at the wall that like nothing's going to stick, nothing's going to work. Versus if you say, okay, I'm going to speak to realtors about how to close more of their listings, right? So, okay, now I know exactly what I'm looking for. And I know where those people gather. I know what those opportunities may be. And so you just got a lot more clarity on what comes next.
Okay, thank you. Is there a does your business need to be a certain size before you go to like a speaker bureau, or do you think it's better for you to, I don't know, look for people on LinkedIn and just cold outreach them? What's the best way to?
Yeah. So to your first question, I would say 99% of speakers do not need a bureau. They do not need an agent whatsoever. And the reason is that bureaus and agents, I've heard it put this way: bureaus don't create demand; they manage demand. Okay. And what we mean by that is, if you're not already consistently getting booked and paid to speak on a regular basis, then a bureau is not going to be able to come in and just magically create something out of thin air for you. Okay. So the other thing is that bureaus, when you think about just laws of supply and demand, it's not like bureaus have, man, we have all these gigs. If only we had speakers to fill them. Like, it just doesn't work like that. Like, they have a ton of speakers, and they have a lot of gigs too, but it's not like there's a shortage. The other thing is that bureaus operate on a commission basis. And because of that, for most speakers, especially early on in their career, you may be able to charge several $1,000s. Say, especially newer speakers are charging anywhere from a couple $1,000s up to maybe 5,000, sometimes up to $10,000 for a speech. But for a bureau, if they're operating off of a commission basis and they have a chance to book you, who's just, someone who's getting started for $3,000, or a speaker who's been at it for a while, that's much more of a known speaker in the industry, and they can charge $25,000, the bureau's getting a commission off either of them. They're probably going to lean more toward a higher dollar speaker. So yeah, all that to say, like, you absolutely should not worry about bureaus. Don't worry about agencies. If you can't book yourself, bureaus and agents aren't going to magically be able to start doing that for you. So what can you do? You kind of alluded to a great option there, Judith, which is LinkedIn. It works really, really well. Google works really, really well, because you want to remember that event planners and decision makers, especially whenever it comes to associations, conferences, conventions, trade shows, events, different meetings, they are already looking for a speaker. So you are providing a solution to a problem that they already have. So if I reach out to a conference planner, I'm not trying to convince them to hire a speaker. They're already planning on hiring a speaker. I'm just showing them why I would be a good option for the problem that they already have. And so a lot of what you're doing is you are building relationships. Like, this is a relationship business, and you're reaching out and showing and starting conversations and finding out what they're looking for, finding out why you would be a good fit for their event, how you can provide a solution to their audience. And so, yeah, you can do it through Google. You can do that through LinkedIn. There's a lot of different tools and resources you can use. But again, the point being that just putting up your website and sitting back and hoping people magically find out about you, like that's not going to work. In the same way that, like, reaching out to bureaus or hoping a bureau magically picks you up doesn't work. So in my own experience, I've booked well over 500 paid speaking engagements, and I'd say 10 or 15 have come from bureaus. And so if I get a bureau gig, great. It's kind of icing on the cake, but I definitely would not recommend for, again, 99% of speakers to build their business on that.
You know what? I think that's really good, because people don't say that, do they? You see a lot of people going out there saying, if you want to speak, hire me and I'll help you get a gig. But it doesn't necessarily seem to be that much. Only if you're this size, or only if you charge out this amount of money.
Yeah. Like, it just, I think the other thing that is appealing to speakers about bureaus is nobody likes to, for the most part, most people don't like the idea of selling, and certainly the idea of selling themselves. And because if I'm selling, let's say, a water bottle, and whoever I'm selling it to isn't interested, like, all right, I'll find someone else who's interested in my water bottle. But if I'm selling me, I'm the product, I'm the speaker, like, and someone's like, you're not really what we're looking for. Like, some people are like, I don't want to deal with that rejection. That doesn't sound fun. So if we can outsource that to a bureau, to an agent, someone else to do the hard lifting, heavy part for us, boy, where do I sign up for that? That sounds great. But again, that's just not the reality, and not how most it's not what most speakers are going to need, and certainly not what bureaus are going to be looking for.
Okay. So tell me, how important do you think for that professional that wants to build a business or bit or get paid to speak, is it to be really good at stagecraft?
Yeah, being good on stage is absolutely a big part of the equation, because if you're great at booking the gig and then you show up and you just suck on stage, like, it's just hard to build a business that way. And that's not true with just speaking. That's true with anything, right? So if you think about, let's go back to the restaurant analogy, for example. Let's imagine that there's a restaurant that they have just like amazing service. The atmosphere is top notch. The experience is so good. The waiter or waitress, the wait staff is just really on top of things. Like, it's just, the whole experience is amazing, but the food is just gross. Like, it just wasn't good at all. Like, you're kind of like, sheesh, everything was awesome, but the star of the show was not good, and it's probably most likely you're not going to go back to that place. And the same thing is true with a speaker. If a speaker's really good at booking gigs, but they don't do good on stage, it's just hard to build a business that way. And so your best marketing is a great talk. You think about a lot of the products or services that we experience, that we tell other people about. Oh, I just saw this Netflix show. You got to see this. Oh, I just saw this movie. You got to check this out. Oh, you got to, I just went to this restaurant. The food's amazing. You got to go there. We talk about it because the product or the service or the experience was so good. And so people don't talk about things that are mediocre. So yes, being good on stage absolutely makes a huge difference in terms of building a long-term successful career as a speaker.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it also kind of ramps off a bit if you're making your main money through, say, training, and someone's seen you speak, then they naturally assume, okay, you've got great stagecraft, you can tell a story, and all that sort of reputation and credibility gets sort of put over onto your ability to train if they haven't seen you do that.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. That we live in a world where speakers have a certain amount of cachet to them. And so when you are in an audience and you see a speaker, you ascribe a certain level of prestige or recognition or expertise to that person that's up on stage. And so someone who can clearly deliver an idea, you tend to trust that person. You tend to believe that person. And so especially, like you said, if you are an entrepreneur, a business owner, and you are speaking as a form of building your audience or lead gen or networking or something like that, and you do a great job on stage, that's the type of thing that people are drawn toward, people want to connect with. And so, yeah, being a good speaker can have huge benefits in multiple ways.
Is there anything you would like to leave the audience?
Yeah, I think a big thing that's important to remember is that building a successful speaking business, again, there's a lot of flexibility in what that can look like and what that means to you. But I'd also just really iterate that it's hard work and it takes time, and it's not just this magical thing. And so sometimes I think there's kind of this misconception that like, hey, I'm gonna reach out to a couple of people, and if it doesn't work, then I'll just move on to the next thing. But being a speaker it's hard work. And so I don't want to sugarcoat it. And so one thing I always remind speakers of is it's simple, but it's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. So it's kind of like if you wanted to lose weight, what do you need to do? Well, there's two core things you need to do. You need to pay attention to what you eat, and you need to exercise. Like, it's simple, but it's not easy. It still requires work and effort and discipline. And the same thing, the same thing is true whenever it comes to being a speaker or being like building a business and being an entrepreneur of any kind. Like, what do you need to do? You need to get customers. You need to take care of them. You need to sell. You need to deliver. Like, it's really simple, but it's not easy. Like, it still requires a lot of work and effort. And the same thing is true with being a speaker. So you can do this, but just make sure that you have proper expectations so that this is not like an overnight success sort of thing.
I'm loving that. Thank you so much, Grant, for coming on the show.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. And thank you once again for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to my conversation with Grant as much as I enjoyed having it.
The Maverick Paradox magazine. The Maverick Paradox magazine is for the pathologically curious. Written by a swagger of socialized mavericks who are divergent thinkers, the magazine tackles the biggest issues affecting maverick leaders today. You might be a business owner or a leader within an organization who wants to have your thinking challenged, to be exposed to a diversity of thought, or to learn from diverse experts in their fields. If so, the Maverick Paradox magazine is for you. Join the swagger at themaverickparadox.com and engage in the conversation.